Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, claims that Australia is a racist country are back in the headlines again, thanks to the ABC's Laura Tingle and her rant at the Sydney Writers' Festival. But just how damaging are claims like hers? And if they're not true, why do people like Laura Tingle persist in making them? Joining me is Indigenous academic Anthony Dillon. Anthony, thanks for being with me. Two questions to start off. Is Australia a racist country? And if it's not, why do people like Laura Tingle and others keep insisting that it is?
Yeah, well, look, we are not a racist country. That doesn't mean we don't have pockets of racism around. And why do they do it? Because it scores points. It wins popularity contests. And as I wrote today, I mentioned that quote from Thomas Sowell. Many people, they just want villains to boo and heroes to cheer. And by saying Australia is a racist country, you become a hero or heroine. It's, intellectual laziness.
It's funny how people talk about Australia being a racist country, but they always seem to remove themselves from Australia when they're speaking of the country that they live in those terms. They're somehow above it all.
Oh, yeah. When you name a country, it becomes impersonal. And, it's a bit like when you have organisations giving an apology on behalf of an industry or something to a group of people. That's meaningless. Unless you name names, it's useless. So, if you're going to call us a racist country, give the evidence, give the criteria for why we are a racist country. And certainly just having some people, some pockets of racism does not necessarily qualify us as a racist country.
You actually wrote in the Australian newspaper that to just smear the entire country as racist, you called that intellectual laziness. What did you mean by that?
Well, because it's taken no effort, no research. Now, if someone had done a survey or did some research which showed that, every city you go into, it's very easy to find racism, well then, you'd have a valid point. But when you just make this sweeping statement, and it's also easy to make, and because when you make it in impersonal Australia, not naming people, a lot of people are going to back you and support you. We are a racist country. But not me. Australia as a whole are racist, but not me.
Right. Which seems to me to make it very difficult to then deal with. People talk about structural racism or inherent racism, which is so nebulous. How do you actually fix that? Like you say, unless there are concrete, specific examples, OK, you can deal with that. But just to throw out broad generalities really makes the person speaking sound very righteous, but does very little to actually enable anything to change.
Yeah, when do you know you've reduced it? When do you know you've eliminated it if you can't really quantify it and mark it in the first place?
Right. Of course, Anthony, one of the big problems in this whole discussion on racism is if you push back and you say, no, Australia's not a racist country, well, then the counter-argument is, well, you only think it's not a racist country because you yourself are part of the system and you've got racism, even unconscious bias that you're not aware of, but you're part of the problem. So you can't even have the argument without then being accused of being racist yourself.
Exactly, and I said that up front. So, again, that's intellectual laziness. And, if they really want to make their point, go out and prove it. Get some good evidence. Show us that it's happening, not just this vague stuff that, we hide behind casual racism or systemic racism or whatever. Give us real examples of racism. And we all know what that is, if not serving people of a particular race in a shop or that sort of thing.
The other thing you wrote in The Australian that really fascinated me, you said that when people denounce an entire country as racist, they're not calling for improvement of the country, they're actually calling for destruction of the country. Can you unpack that for me? Not
only are they calling for destruction, they're also elevating themselves as a saint. And when you characterise a country like that as racist, it gives us a poor reputation internationally, and it can create self-doubt in some people's minds that, if they miss out on a job or something, well, actually, that's proof that it's racism because I heard some idiot on TV on the left-leaning media calling us racist. So, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in the eyes of some people.
Well, I tell you what, your column was an absolute cracker in The Australian. It was a great read. I encourage people grab a copy of... Was it today's?
Today's Australian.
Today's Australian. Grab a copy, have a read. It was very good. Anthony Dillon, thank you so much for your time.